Today we're going to solve 15-mark question from October-November 2023, paper 2-1. This is a bit simple question in comparison to the other ones. So as always, we'll be looking at the 3 steps. First, we'll plan, then we'll visualize, and in the third part, we'll write the code. So let's start the planning part. We'll be highlighting the information as we go along. So drama students put on a performance of a play for one evening. Seats in a small theater can be booked for this performance. The theater has 10 rows of 20 seats. Okay, so this is very clear that you have 10 rows and 20 columns. The status of the seat bookings for the evening is held in the 2D array called evening. Each element contains false if the seat is available. So false if the seat is available and true if the seat is booked. All right, so which makes sense. If somebody has already taken your seat, then you cannot book that. So that is why we'll set it to false, and it will be true if the seat is already booked. Then up to and including 4 seats. So this is important part. At any given point in time, only a maximum of 4 seats can be booked. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Not more than 4 and not less than 1. Seats are allocated in order from those available. A row or seat number cannot be requested. Okay, so that means everything will be done linearly, like one by one in the same row, and then you'll go to the next row and next row wherever the availability is. Nobody can request a certain seat. It's not simulating the real cinema. The array evening has already been set up. So now what do we have to do? First of all, we have to count and output the number of seats that are already booked. So we have to count. Then we have to allow the user to input the number of seats required. Okay, so this should be up to. So validation here means that up to 4 seats at max. Then check if enough seats are available. If they are available, then we will change the status of the seat, and we have to output the row number for each seat booked and seat number. So that means that we have to simply output the row and column number as well. And change the status of the seat means that if the seat is available, the status would be false. So change false to true, like this. All right. So false if the seat is available and true if the seat is booked. So if you see any seat that is already false, it means you will set it to true and that seat would be booked. If they are not available, you need to output a message telling the number of seats left or the house full if the theater is fully booked. So we can go for the house full approach, right? You must use pseudocode. You need to add comments. You do not need to initialize the array evenings, and all the inputs should contain suitable messages. Okay, this is a straightforward question. Okay, so we need to have some, first of all, in this part we'll be looking at a 2D array evening. So that also means that we'll be looking at nested loops. Okay, because we always need 2 loops to iterate through the array, one for the row and one for the column. And now the next part is that we'll be visualizing this. So this is the visualization here done already. So we have an array with 10 rows and we have an array with 20 columns, this 2D array called evening. And then I obviously skipped some columns. You don't need to look into it in detail. So this just gives you the general idea. Okay, so let's say I want to book 4 tickets. So the first one would be skipped because it's true. And then since this is available, this would become true. Then second is available, third is available, fourth is available, like this. So that means I successfully got my 4 tickets and the order is complete. Let's say you have another customer. They want to purchase maybe 3 tickets. So we'll start from the first row, first column, go all the way till we find a false. Okay, that means the seat is not booked yet. We set this to true, so we need 3 seats, seat 1, then we ignore this, seat 2 and seat 3, so on and so forth. So this is how we have to do. Okay, next time maybe somebody needs 1 seat, so again we'll start from the first row, first column, all the way till 20th column, then second row, first column, all the way till the end until we find a false. So we set it to true as well. And let's say if all of these values become true as well, and if somebody needs 3 seats now, so we'll start from the first row, we make our way to the second row, then we make our way to the third row, and now we've come across this false, so we set it to true. And then maybe there was a true here already. Okay, let's assume it was there already. So now you have to pick the second seat here. Okay, so the spaces would not always be contiguous, they won't always be adjacent to each other, so you set it to true. And now there's still one more seat needed. So we have these 2 seats and the third one would be here. So we set it to true as well. So as the question said, you will not be allowed to select specific seats. That means you won't be able to, in this program, you cannot allocate people together unless if the seats are available in like couple of columns together. So this is the whole idea. So we'll have one loop that will iterate through the rows, and then we'll have the one loop that will be iterating through columns. This is the idea of this program, which is the visualization part that we've done. Now we'll be looking at the coding part. So let's begin. First of all, we should mention how many seats we have, because we also need to calculate if the house is full or not yet. Okay, so the house would be full when we have 200 seats done. So How do we know 200 seats? Because this is the 10 rows and 20 columns, and if you look at the array, if you multiply them, this is 200 seats. So maybe we can just declare a variable here called total seats for our convenience. So total seats is set to 200. Also, we do not need to declare anything, so that is why I'm not declaring anything. But let's say if you had to declare it, so you have to follow the pseudocode guide format, declare total seats colon integer, and then you can initialize it like this. Okay, but this is not needed, so I'm skipping it. In the first part, they're saying that we need to count the number of seats that are already booked for the evening. So maybe let's call it seats and we set it to 0, and now we need to count them. So the seats that are already booked are set to true. All right, so simply we need to count how many values are true. And in our case, there would be like almost 20, 25 values. Okay, 20, more than 25, almost 30 values. Okay, so how do we do this? Again, we use a nested loop. We go from the first row, first column, second, third, fourth. Every time we come across a true, we just add a counter, increment the counter by 1 like this. And if we come across any false, we simply ignore this, and we'll keep counting these true as we go along. So in a 2D array, this is how we iterate. So iterating evening array and counting bookings. So for row 1 2, the total number of rows is 10, and then for column 1 2 20, or you can also use this word seat as they've used. Okay, but it's totally up to you. Then we check if the current value, or let's get the current value, is equal to evening row comma column. Okay, why am I writing this? Because this is the syntax of a 2D array in your syllabus. Simply means that you need to get this row and this column. Okay, so initially row would be 1 and column would also be 1. So the first value that we get would be true. In fact, I'll just make some of these false as they were already. Okay, so the first value is true, so that means that the seat it's not available. Okay, so we'll count this. So this will be counted. Then let's say the loop completes. I'll say next call, and then column becomes, so from this point we go back to line 6. Now column becomes equal to 2. So now I'm saying row 1 second column. So row 1, and we look at the second column, this is false. That means this seat is not booked yet, so we will not count it. Then next column means go to the third column, so on and so forth. So we'll keep on doing this until we reach the 20th column. So after the 20th column, we'll have the next row. This would change the value of the outer loop. So now row becomes 2, and then inner loop again starts from 1 to 20. So this becomes, row becomes 2 and column becomes 1. So for each iteration of the outer loop, inner loop will be running completely from the starting point, from the first value. So second row first value, this is again true, so we ignore it, we count it. Okay, then this becomes 2 comma 2. This means second row second column, this is not booked yet, so we ignore 3 4 5 6 7 8, etc etc etc. So this is the idea. Alright, so we get the current value. So it would either be true or false, and we have to check if the value is true. So if the seat is booked, and then we have to count it. So we simply check if current is equal to true. You can either write it this way, or in case of a boolean, you don't need to write anything. You can just write it this way. It would mean if current is equal to true. And if you write it this way, this simply means if current is equal to false. But if you're not familiar with it, you can simply use the generic notation. So you check if the a value of current is equal to true, then we are going to increment the seats by 1, and then we end it. And if the booking is not done, you don't need to do anything. We just need to count these values. So we are done with the first part. This is it. This is the first part. Okay, and we also need to output. So there are always marks allocated for outputs as well. Okay, if you don't output this, you will not get the complete marks for this task. This would be output total seats booked comma seats, and this will get you the total count. In our case, it would be 28. Okay, so we're done with the first part. Then in the second part, it says allows the user to input the number of seats required, and then you have to validate the input. So we have to make sure that the input is between 1 to 4 inclusive. Here we can say taking users order or taking users booking seat. All right, so here we have to again use a conditional loop, because we do not know at what point will user input a correct value. So you cannot use a for loop here, because for loop runs for a fixed number of times. So if you run a for loop, let's say 10 times, there is no guarantee that the user will input the values correctly between 1 to 4 within 10 times or within 10 tries. So here we either use a while loop, or we either use a repeat until loop. I'll use a repeat until loop. It's totally up to you which one you want to use. So output enter or how many seats you want to book, 1 to 4 allowed. All right, so here you take input from the user, and then you check the condition would be until the booking is between 0 and 4, right? Until booking is greater than equal to 1 and booking is less than equal to 4. So until and unless this is not true, let's say if the user first inputs 6 is not in this range, so this will be repeated. If somebody inputs -1, it's not in this range, so this will keep on repeating until you input the right number. That's it. Okay, now we need to check if enough seats are available. Okay, so we already have a count of seats which is saved in seats. These are the number of the bookings that are already done, and now you want to make your own booking, individual booking. Okay, so let's say there are 28 seats booked right now and you want to book, let's say, 3 more. For the sake of simplicity, we are assuming that max allowed is equal to 30 and 28 have already been booked. So if you try to input plus 3 seats, that would mean 28 plus 3 would equal to 31 seats, which is wrong. Okay, the maximum capacity of the cinema is 30, or the theater is 30, so this will not be allowed. So we have to use the same formula here. We have to add the number of bookings of the seats that you want to do right now with the current overall bookings that have been previously done, and then check if the house is full or not, right? So here we have to check if the seats are available. Checking theater capacity. All right, so what do we do here? We are going to check if the booking that you have made right now, let's say 3 seats, added with the seats that are already booked. So in our case, we assume that the 28 seats have been booked and the maximum allowed is 30, but in this question obviously it's going to be 200, but this was just to simplify. So we are checking the number of our bookings plus the number of already done bookings. If they are equal to or less than the maximum capacity, then that is fine. So I'll just take this away. So we check if the booking plus seat number is greater than 200. Okay, so if it becomes greater than 200, then the question says then you have to output house full or the number of seats left. So in our case, we'll say output house full, no seats left. All right, so otherwise, now this is the main part that we have to do now. Otherwise, it says that if they are available, so if the number of seats that you want to book plus the seats that have already been booked, let's say the book seats you want to book is 3 and the previous bookings done have been 150, so the total would be 153. Since 153 is less than 200, so this would be allowed. Okay, now if this would be allowed, what do we need to do? We need to change the status of the seats, and we need to output the row number and the seat number for each seat booked. Okay, now this is a bit tricky. So what we have to do here is, let's say if you are going to book 4 seats, as I said before, so we need to set the values to true one by one. All right, and let's say if contiguous or adjacent seats are not available, then what do? We need to keep on going through different rows and different columns until there is the right availability. Okay, so I want 4 seats now. Okay, now what do I need to do? There is no guarantee that they'll be present in the same row, and there is no guarantee they'll be present in the same column. There is no guarantee they would be adjacent. So every time you need to start from the first row and you need to go all the way till the last row, and you need to go all the way from the first column till the last column, and you need to keep repeating this until you have seen all the rows from 1 to 10, one condition, and until the number of seats that you are looking for have been fulfilled. So let's say if you are looking for 4 seats, then you'll get it here 1. So let's start from this point. We have booking done here. Okay, so now this row is complete. We need to go to the next row, then second, third, and fourth. So this was one booking. Okay, let's say if I want to do another booking again, I'll need to go to 2 columns, and then I'll need to go to the third row as well. So what are we doing here is, in this case, we simply iterate through each row, or you check while row is less than equal to 10 and the count is less than the booking. Okay, what is booking? Booking is the number of seats that we are doing, and this count would be the count that we have made so far. Okay, so this will be set to 0 initially, and until and unless we have completed the number of bookings that we require, let's say 3 or 4, till that point we will keep on iterating through the rows and columns. So this would be the first requirement, or the outer loop, and then the inner loop would be while, or you, again, this is not pseudocode, I'm just writing English right now, structured English. So while column, check while column is less than equal to 20 and count is also less than booking. Okay, so you need to make sure both these conditions are there, because otherwise if you go into the second column and the booking is already complete, so your loop will not low, and this will keep on working till the end. We do not want this loop to work throughout the 200 seats. Okay, this loop worked for 200 seats because we had to count the seats that were booked. In this case, we do not need to go through the whole 2D array because we only want to book a certain number of seats, and as soon as it is done, we will exit the loop. That is why we are using these while loops here with two conditions, and in both conditions we are checking that until and unless the total number of bookings have been done that we require, we will keep on iterating through the 2D array called evening. Okay, so once this is done, if we come across any value, so change current evening booking to false if it is true. What we have to do is, again, contains false if the seat is available and true if the seat is booked. So if the seat is available, it should be true. If it is false, my bad. Okay, so if the seat is available, it is set to false, then you need to book it and then change it to true. With this done, we also need to increment our count by 1. Okay, so why am I incrementing my count again? Because count would initially be set to 0. So here we'll have set count to 0. This will be initially set to 0, and every time we make a booking, every time we see a value that was with seat was not booked yet and we booked it, so we increment the count by 1 so that we can check every time inside the loop if the number of booking that we require has been made yet or not, and then we can output the row and the column and etc. And then only one thing we need to add here is that every time we go into this loop, since we are doing a while loop, it does not have the range function for column 1 to 20, for column 5 to 7, so we need to always reset it to 1. Again, why are we resetting? Because if you do not reset, let's say if the previous loop worked all the way till 6 maybe, so the next time it will again start from 6 and then we'll go from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We don't want that. Every time we go to the second row, third row, fourth row, every time we go to the new row, we want to iterate through all the columns, 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So we need to set it to 1 every time. And before we go into the row should also be set to 1 because we want to start from the first row initially. So this is the whole idea. Now I'll get rid of it and I'll write the proper code here. So count would be set to 0. And again, this is the count that is checking for bookings that we have to make. In our case, let's say the booking was 3, so we have to make 3. Okay, so while row is less than equal to 10 and count is less than booking, again this count is set to 0 initially and booking is the number of seats we have, that is 3, and then column is initially set to 1 because we always want to reset the column from 1, and then while column is less than equal to 10 and count is less than booking as well, again the same condition as above, until and unless you have not made the 3 bookings. In our case, again I'm just using a random value, but the code should always be generic. So if evening, or again you can just substitute it with the current value, current row comma column. So if current, if it is equal to false, so if the current is equal to false, that means seat is available, so you need to change it to true. Then you say evening row comma column would be set to true, like this. So when the seat is, yes, this is fine. Okay, so or if you want, you can do it directly as well. You don't need to do this extra step here, so we can get rid of it. Totally up to you. I'll just go and write here. So if it is equal to false, or you can simply say if not, if the value is false, then you save true in the current row and current column. So if we are looking at this first booking, I want to change it to true. So this is what I've done. This would be row 2, column 19. So that's it, how it's working. Okay. By the way, this should be 20, not 10. We set this value to true and we increment the count by 1. This is the value that is keeping track if we have made enough bookings yet or not. So we have only made 1 booking so far. We still have to do 2 more because our booking number is 3. And then the question, it says output the row number and the seat number for each seat booked. Okay, so for this you can just output some appropriate messages. So you can say seats booked, or you can say seat booked. Row number would be row, and then output seat number would be column. Again, I'm not using the word column number because the question uses the word seat, so that is why we are using the seat number. And then we end this, and we have this end while, and we have this end while. Okay, now if I leave it like this, this will go in an infinite loop because row is initially set to 1 and column is also initially set to 1. So this will keep on running for 1 forever. We are never changing the value of rows and columns because we are not incrementing it manually. Again, inside a for loop does it for you for something start to end. Here you have the code, and then you write next v, let's say, and here we have v here. So this next v means that you need to increment the value of v by 1. But in case of a while loop, you don't have this liberty, so you need to manually increment the counter. Otherwise, it will always end up going into the infinite loop and will basically corrupt your code. So once we have this while loop here for the column, so after the end if, I need to change the value of column by 1 so that it goes to the next column. Okay, it makes total sense. Initially column was 1, so once you have checked the condition, the column should now go to 2. So for row 1, you check for column 1, and now you go to column 2. And similarly, after this end while, because this while is associated with the column, now the outer while is associated with row. So before we go to the next iteration of this row, we need to increment the value of row by 1 as well. Like so, initially row would be 1 and column would run from 1 to 20 times. Once this loop ends, row becomes 2, column again becomes 1, and this again runs from 1 to 20 times. Exactly how it is supposed to behave, like this, row by row. And we end this while loop, and then we had this else here, so we need to end if this else as well, and that is it. This is the whole question. I believe it's complete. So this is the solution. That's all.